This is a quick demonstration of Roster Wizard. Roster Wizard is software for automatically generating rosters. It was initially designed for rostering nurses on shifts in hospital wards. Before you can generate a roster, you need to set up the details for your roster. For example, staff details and their roles, the names of the shifts, the skill mix rules, which are for specifying what staff need to work on each shift type. I'll explain that more later. Shift sequences, which are rules for determining what sequence of shifts staff can work. For example, we've got a rule here that staff can't work 3 night shifts in a row. You put in the leave as well, so that staff aren't rostered while they're on leave. And you can also enter staff requests, which are basically requests from staff to work particular shifts, and the roster software, Roster Wizard, attempts to schedule those as requested, so long as it can make or obey the rules, the skill mix rules and shift sequences rules, and etc. Okay, to generate a roster, you go to roster and click generate roster. Pick the start date for the roster period, click submit, and it just creates a roster in background. Okay, that's done. So you can then display the roster in 2 different ways. You can display it by staff, so it has a list of all the staff and the dates and the shifts they'll be working. Or you can also display it by day, so you can see each shift and who's working on it. Okay, I'll just go back over the details you need to enter before you generate a roster. One of the first important ones is under day groups. You set the number of days in your roster period. For this particular one, I chose 14. And then we have the concept of day groups, which are used by the rules. So they basically specify particular groups of days. So I've got 2 groups here: all days, which includes all 14 days in the roster period, and I've got weekdays, which just includes the weekdays. So this roster period starts on a Monday, so 1 to 5 are weekdays, 6 and 7 are the weekend, and 13 and 14 are the weekend. So the weekdays day group does not include those days. Okay, you configure your shifts. So we have an early and a night shift in this roster, and we've associated them with particular day groups. So early shifts are worked on all days of the roster, and night shifts are worked only on weekdays. Skill mix rules. This is how you say what staff are needed for each shift type. So we've got early shift here, and we've got 3 options. So the roster software will pick one of those options to generate a roster, whichever one suits best to generate a valid roster. So we've got an option here. We've got 3 RNs. RN is a designational role, so stands for registered nurse in this case. So we've got here, early shift can have either 3 RNs, or option B, 2 RNs and 1 SRN. SRN is a senior registered nurse in this case. And option C is 1 RN and 2 SRNs. So this is a fairly flexible roster. For the night shift, we've got similar options. Okay, so this ensures that you have the staff that you need on a particular shift. If we go to shift sequences, this is for specifying shift sequences that staff cannot work. You can apply different rules to different staff. So I've got 2 rules here: no 3 nights in a row, and no early shift after a night shift. And you can see on the right hand side how they're specified. Because I've got night 1, night 2, night 3 there, that means you can't work that sequence, so 3 night shifts in a row. For the no early after night rule, it's got night 1, early 2, so an early shift can't appear in a position just after a night shift. Okay, so you can come up with all sorts of shift sequence rules according to your requirements. Leave's pretty straightforward. Just enter the dates that the staff are on leave, so they're not scheduled on the roster. Staff requests. I've got 2 there already, so this person's requested on Thursday the 8th to work an early shift and not a night shift. So that's their preference. So when you generate a roster, it does its best to satisfy that request. You can have whatever, by editing the request, you can request whatever you like. Doesn't guarantee you'll get them. The default for a request is don't care, so the roster software can schedule you if it wants. But you can set it to yes or no. So you've got all the dates of the roster here and all the shifts, and you can choose your request for each one. Yes, no, or don't care. And then update it. You can also set a priority, so the roster administrator would set a priority if they wanted to give one staff member's request priority over another. It's just a numerical thing, so if you've set most staff to 1, if there was a particular staff member who you wanted to almost guarantee they get their request, you might set it to priority 10 or 2 at least. So that's how that works. Okay, so then you've got the various options for displaying the roster, which I showed you before. Display the roster by day, display the roster by staff, just 2 different ways of presenting the same information. You can generate a new roster, as I showed you before. I'll just do that again. So it just processes it in background, and when it's ready it comes up with this display, and then you can display the roster. Okay, you can also download the roster as a CSV file. So if you want to import it into a spreadsheet, you click that option and save it. And then you can open it in a spreadsheet program like Excel and do whatever you like, change the format of the display, colorize things like that, and email them to staff, whatever you like. Okay, you'll notice on the header of the application there's a label of the medical ward 4 in this case. That's basically the name of this roster, or the name of the location this roster applies to, and also the period that the roster starts at. Okay, so you can change that by clicking here if you want. Select a new roster period, or when you generate the roster, you pick the start date as you wish there. Okay, that gives you a brief overview of Roster Wizard.